Hello and welcome to this webinar about natural leadership. Hello and welcome also the listeners to the podcast or if you watch the replay. In the podcast, this will be episode number 24. I will go to my script because today it will be a bit longer. If you have any questions or comments, you can use the chat, write it in the comments. And yes, let's start. So, natural leadership. To understand where we are and why, it is helpful to take a look back at where we come from. I'm a great believer in science, and more often I hear it's overrated, it's not that important. I see smartphone and medicine, electricity, bathroom with hot running water is not that important. Okay, so anyone who thinks that medicine or communication or transport is not important or overrated can say goodbye now. Nothing is more constant than the change. One side, Heraclitus. Of course, science is not infallible. Much of what we thought we knew has long been outdated or refuted. And much of what we think we know today will perhaps be corrected too one day. I also fully understand the fear of science. Our view of the world is being shaken. Everything we think is normal and natural may look completely different tomorrow. Let's take feminism. Medicine and traffic or transport are designed almost exclusively for the male body. And in society too, we have a very male centered image of the natural role of a woman. When science suddenly says, no, everything is completely different, it can frighten some people. Maybe they lose their power. So, what does this have to do with natural leadership? Today, we look at the world, at nature and animals from a patriarchal perspective. We assume dominance, strict hierarchies, alpha males, the right of the strongest. Patriarchy developed in some regions as a result of people becoming sedentary. The oldest sources in which women are systematically devalued can be found in antiquity in Rome, Greece, and Egypt. From there, patriarchy began its triumphal march through societies all over the world. This was made possible by brute force, which can still be seen very clearly in the Greek depiction of the destruction of the Amazons or in the writings of the Romans who declared war on the Celts and Etruscans, and won in the end. Celts, Etruscans, and Amazons had more or less equal societies. So, the view we have today, we have learned over the last thousand of years through our way of life, in which women, nature, and wilderness are fundamentally less valuable, must be tamed or destroyed. And to understand this, and also to understand why this is not exactly helpful, let alone correct or wise, let's take a few steps back. I take the first steps very quickly. So, the age of the planet is about 4.5 billion years. This is a 4.5 and 12 zeros. The wolf's ancestors were marten-like carnivores 50 million years ago. It's a 50 and 6 zeros. Chimpanzees and the original form of human separated about 7 to 5 million years ago. This is 500,000 years. The first modern human was found in Africa and about 300 years old. The oldest wolves finds are currently dated to around 50,000 years ago. Domestication of the wolf around 40,000 to 20,000 years ago. And settling down of humans about 12 to 10,000 years ago. It's always been like this, should perhaps be reconsidered. Recent studies, I will link all scientific articles in the appendix after this. Recent studies come to the conclusion that the wolf has domesticated itself, if this is possible. Until 12,000 years ago, humans were nomads. They followed the herds of animals just like the wolves. Humans lived in small clans where each individual was important. The reproduction rate was lower than today, and the mortality rate was higher. Women were just as involved in hunting as men. They were more equal. For a long time, it was assumed that humans had tamed and domesticated the wolf. Today, some people believe that wolves joined humans for their own accord because it was advantageous for them. We know from wolves that they live in cooperation with ravens and even bears. We also know that there is a cooperation between the Native Americans and wolves, not only in their spirituality, but also in everyday life. North America or America had no horses. The first horses came with the Europeans. Until this time, the Native Americans worked with wolves and dogs. The view of the history of the domestication of the wolf has an act of human domination over nature, and the animal is a contemporary patriarchal view. The view of cooperation between humans and wolves is a rather natural one. Two creatures cooperate because there's an advantage for both. In addition, the family structures and natural social behavior of humans and wolves are basically very similar. Back then, humans and wolves lived and hunted together as nomads. To do this, both had to know their own structures and behavior very well, as well as that of the others and also of the prey. Now, around 10, 12,000 years ago, people began to settle down. And this changed a lot in people's lives. The idea of ownership emerged. Land, possessions, and property had to be defended. We know that not only the way of life, but also the social structure now changed. There was increased competition, conflict, and disease. Whereas the members of a clan used to be considered equal because the survival of the clan was at stake, hierarchies and oppression now emerged. People were given a certain value. This meant better or less care. All of this had consequences. Animals were now locked up to be used. This not only led to disease caused by the close coexistence between humans and animals. Measles probably originated from rinderpest. It also led to progressive domestication and thus to changes in animal behavior. Why is this important? Because for 12,000 years we have been living together with animals under unnatural conditions, with animals that no longer display natural behavior. We either. And our supposed knowledge of animals' behavior and structure is based on this. But it is important to understand that we look at our animals with our human eyes, which have themselves suffered from domestication, patriarchy, oppression, and conditioning for 12,000 years. How can this view still be neutral? We believe that we believe that what has developed over the last. Hi, Lise. Hi, welcome. Nice to see you. We have already no. We believed that what has developed over the last 12,000 years as a result of our influence is normal or natural. Measuring against 5 million years of human history, I think that is a bit presumptuous. We have already recognized the first big mistake, at least some of us. In the middle of the last century, we captured and caged wolves to study their behavior. This was absolutely unnatural behavior under these conditions. It led to conflicts, competition, hierarchy, and dominance behavior. Strange. Isn't that what happened to humans when they settled down? And I really don't want to whitewash or glorify the Stone Age. It wasn't all better before, just different. And we don't want to go back to the Stone Age. But we have to understand where we are and how we came to this position now. So, based on humans' dominance, we now look at caged animals and assume dominance behavior and see this as the basis for dealing with our dog or horse. We have to be tough and always be the boss. The same applies to horses. Here too, we have not seen the horses in their natural environment. with their natural behavior in a strong family group. We lock them up and there is stress because there is too little space, too little food, and no free choice of social partners. Natural behavior is not possible here. We continually ignore the important role of the male and or female wolf. A study in Denali National Park in the USA has shown that 77% of packs whose parents, or only one parent, die do not survive. We ignore the extremely fine social fabric of these families simply because we look the way we are used to, the way we have learned. It simply corresponds to our world view. Man is the crown of creation and therefore the boss. And by man here, I mean the man, not the woman. When we observe herds or packs in nature today, we see families. No strict hierarchies as with animals in captivity. We see social behavior, empathy, and support. We see that females have a very important role, not just reproduction. Many groups are led by females or by an equal pair. If you don't want to see that, then just don't look so closely. What does this do to our natural leadership? Good question. Because what is natural? For me, it is first of all very important that we perceive all of this neutrally and objectively. It is what it is. We are here now, and this is our story. We are part of this. This should not be judged or condemned. If I don't evaluate it, I don't develop my emotions. That was good and that was bad, and then comes the anger or frustration or fear. Without judgment and without emotions, I have the opportunity to take a neutral look at my pet, at me, at our living conditions, at our wishes and needs. Do I live in the city center, multi party house? Then I have different requirements than if I live alone in the middle of nowhere. How can I fulfill these requirements? Above all, with fairness. Every dog, every animal, every social creature needs a framework when interacting with other creatures. It needs guidance and clear rules. The only question is, how do I enforce these rules? How do I educate? I can even use subordination or obedience fairly and wisely. Violence and oppression tend to be destructive. But many male conditioned people, also women, yes, too, still have the idea that they have to be dominant as the pack leader, sitting at the head, eating first, the biggest piece on plate. Everyone else is subordinate and has to submit and adapt. So the dog first has to wait in front of the full bowl, and then the bowl is taken away again. This is called abuse of power and has nothing to do with leadership, which does not mean that it can be helpful to be able to take food or prey away from your dog. This is exactly what we don't actually find in nature in animals that are supposed to cooperate with us when they live under natural conditions. In his book, The Pizza Dogs, Günter Bloch describes a case from the USA. There, a pack of wolves was observed in the wild. The highest ranking female in the pack was a despot. She terrorized the other pack members and behaved in an absolutely antisocial manner. And this is actually atypical for a pack leader. So, this actually led to this female being killed by the other females one day. The lower ranking females joined forces and from then on successfully led the pack together as a team. I would simply say that because we humans are usually very preoccupied with ourselves, we often don't realize what's going on in nature, especially if it doesn't correspond with our worldview. I have lived with a lot of dogs over the last few years, neglected dogs from families, abused dogs, and feral dogs from the street. The family dogs had been left alone and to their own devices by their humans. This is a disaster for a social creature, especially as our dogs are often bred to fulfill a specific purpose. These dogs need people. They need a task. They need a framework and guidance. They want to do something for us. We have programmed them to do this for thousands of years. The feral street dogs are already one step further and emphasis on feral. This doesn't not apply to all street dogs. They no longer need humans. They often have no desire for humans at all. So, our overbearing behavior, our addiction to control, our dominance over nature is extremely human and extremely unnatural because we are living in constant fear. Because we are constantly thinking about what bad things could happen, perhaps, maybe. The dog simply lives with all the consequences, and this is nature. Natural leadership does not mean simply letting the dog do what it wants to. My street dogs have taught me to take the lead without traditional conditioning or tools such as leads and biscuits. Yes, they get biscuits, a lot of biscuits, but they don't have to do anything for it. Biscuits are extremely helpful, especially at the beginning to build trust. You can read more about this in my article on the benefits of sharing food. But there are no biscuits as a means of pressure during training, as a distraction, or even as a reward. Because that's what wolves do in the wild. They look after their family. They share food with their old, the weak, and the young. They do not use food as a means for exerting pressure to achieve something. In nature, food only becomes an issue when there is not enough. And even then, the wolf still endeavors to feed the whole family as well as possible. Above all, natural leadership is not characteristic by violence, dominance, or alpha behavior. It's about cooperation, about working together. We can learn from each other. When we free ourselves from rigid role models and learned structures and take a neutral look at ourselves and our relationship, human animal, we discover old resources such as body language and intuition. We learn to communicate in a new way. We learn to set boundaries and take the lead without carrots and sticks. We take responsibility and don't act according to a 0815 rule. Every dog, every person is an individual with their own needs, strengths, and weaknesses. Natural leadership means being authentic, predictable, fair, and reliable. Our common history is 40,000 years old, and no matter how it started, in the end it was all about cooperation. You want to be the pack leader? You're not a dog. You are not a family member. You're too slow. You cannot hear well. You cannot sniff very good. You have no manners. You look others in the eyes and approach them head on, grab their heads from above. That's not what dogs do. Don't try to be a dog. Be yourself. Be authentic. Learn the dog language. Accept your dog as it is. And if he is smarter in some areas, then be grateful that he is looking after you. Does your dog want to take the lead? These dogs often need more space, have a greater individual distance, or are born leaders. Just respect that. You are allowed to follow your dog. You are allowed to listen to your dog. This has already saved my life. Cooperation does not mean that one does what the other says. It means that you are working together as a team. And within this framework, you can do anything, whether it is dog sport, service dog training, or obedience. Natural leadership is not a technique, it is an inner attitude based on respect and trust. What we consider to be natural today often has nothing to do with naturalness in the original sense. There are already far too many veils clouding our view. 3 trees don't make a jungle. With an area of around 350,000 square kilometers, Germany in Europe only has a wilderness percentage of 1%. Everything else is cultivated land, green, but not wild and natural. I don't know how much wilderness it's in the world, but it's, I think, maybe 5% left. The rest is human culture, cultivated land. So, if you look around in nature, leadership means sovereignty, security, structure, predictability, solution orientated, for the benefit of all, looking ahead, authentic, empathic. So called leader animals are often high sensitive. They know, feel, and see more than the others. They are not elected or have to fight for or defend their position, but the others automatically follow them on the basis of their abilities. Leadership is usually transferred from mother to daughter. Families, herds, or packs are often led by a couple. Our idea of male and female is also subject to human construction. These are all just attempts at explanation in order to create a system that we can orientate ourselves by and use to create our social order, which in turn disadvantage some of that others can benefit from it. This idea is far removed from nature. Nature is just about survival, the preservation of the species and the clan, just as people did before settling down. Yin and yang, which are so often quoted when it comes to energy, are just 2000 years old, maybe 2500 years old, and are based on the observation of nature. It is a philosophical human view, even those with a veiled gaze, because 2000 years is not much. It's actually quite little compared to 300,000 years of modern man and 12,000 years of civilization. In short, we like to think up things that are useful for us. This is how we shape our environment. That's how we look at our environment. However, this usually has nothing to do with what the environment is likely really are. That's why objective observations is so extremely important. The leadership personnel we have in our world today would not work in nature. No herd, no pack, no family would be so stupid as to entrust its survival to a despot who destroys the family instead of leading or protecting it. Basically, it's all about security, to survive safely, to find something to eat, to have good places to sleep, to bring the offspring through well. So, not everything was better in the past. It's always been that way, is bad advice anyway. We can continue to develop. Let us take this power. Power is the opposite of violence. It's about self empowerment. And that means freeing yourself from all the constructs and norms that society imposes on you, and looking at what is important and right for you and your dog. And I don't mean that you let him run free during breeding season so that he can find dinner in the field like a wolf. Self empowerment always goes hand in hand with personal responsibility, with responsibility and also safety for others. Selfishness, violence, a lack of empathy are definitely the end of natural leadership. Next week, we will look at the horses in the round pens to get a better look at the misunderstanding how horses behave in the wild and in captivity. So, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it helps a bit. And I will continue to talk about this topic because I think it's important to understand the circumstances, the relations. And yes, I wish you and your horse, dog, cat a wonderful time and maybe see you next week. Thank you, Ria. It was great. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you very much. I appreciate you. I wish you a wonderful day and goodbye.